implement my mission also in their bilantaire strategic. So I'm very happy. I need to adopt that. So we think we only can successful do this transition by working closely together and share data and share everything. And the most important, what we are successful in, is to involve the locals, to involve all the players, the big and the small players, to get sympathy from the locals, because we are guests at their country, at their land, and we don't want to be aggressive. So we want to be family. So that is what I have established over the last 10 years. And now it's accelerating very hard, because Morocco has now offered in Morocco net a strategy and has a roadmap, and it's clear for every investor. You can see that because in 2 weeks more than 90 projects are applicated. So that's us, and I'm happy to share it with everyone. And like Morocco, the king said, everything we have, we share it with our African brothers. So I will also invite every African country to come visit us or contact me to join and to learn from each other and to work closely together. So thank you very much. Mauritania, backyard, great ambition. I like the green steel idea. I know also Mauritania and Morocco are working very close together. Exactly, Morocco works with 13 countries in Africa. And yeah, one of the big players and big partners in Morocco is Mauritania. And I would love to hear from you. Oh, wait, introduce yourself. Oh, first.
Thank you very much, Nordin. And for the sake of not sounding like a broken record, this is my second panel today. So my name is Fadel Selman. I'm the founder of Pegasus Logistics in Mauritania. Prior to that, I was working with the United Nations World Food Programme in the Regional Bureau of Dakar, covering 21 countries, meaning from Cameroon to Central Africa, Nigeria. So it equipped me with this knowledge in terms of complex supply chains. So I went back to Mauritania to found this company in order to provide for customers these supply chain optimization solution that encompass end-to-end solution, and also help international stakeholders navigate more easily the complex environment in Africa. So I think you can now go to the question, or should I pass the mic to
Hello, everybody. My name is Frank Mischler. I'm part of the GSZ, which is the German Development Corporation. We receive our funding from the German ministry mostly, so from the Ministry of Economic Affairs and the Ministry of Development Corporation. And well, it's clear that for Germany, hydrogen is quite an important thing. So they invest heavily, as you know. Minister Habeck travels the world and leaves MOUs, and then GSZ picks it up, and we do something with it. We have big teams in many countries: Morocco, Algeria, Egypt, Kenya, South Africa, Namibia. There was this big delegation from the EU going to Mauritania a couple of weeks ago. GSZ was part of it, because there will be a big program from the German government as well. So we are kind of all over the place, and in a nutshell, prepare the ground for private sector to then step in and start business. So capacity development, institutional development, regulatory framework, pilot plans, demonstration plans, all of this. Thank you.
Well, you get another German next to the one. Andy Fuchs to the Mobility Foundation. So if you carry the name Toyota, you normally don't have to introduce yourself, because I think we're quite known. But we are the non-commercial part of the Toyota Group. So what we do founded 2014 by Akio Toyoda, we go where the group can't go. So we're funding in Africa, and this is why I'm here today as well, projects in microgrids, in microeconomy, bringing electric mobility and electricity to farmers that had no real opportunity to develop maybe. But interestingly enough, in Eastern Africa and Kenya, we're currently looking also at hydrogen. And we're looking at in a different perspective, like many of you here. So we are not the Siemens, we are not the Air Liquide. We see this as an opportunity for Africa, really developing also African communities. And this links it very much also to Morocco, because we want to share. And the partner, and it might be very surprising to you to hear this, is the Catholic Church. So the Archbishop of Mombasa was coming to Cologne to learn about hydrogen, and he has the vision to bring hydrogen forward also in Kenya.
Well, thank you very much. There's some. I want to give the voice and the word to Africans, and you are the only one. So, how do you, or someone from the audience is also good. How would you like to see a cooperation in the energy transition in your country? How will you see your country benefit out of this transition?
Thank you very much, Nordin, for this question. I think we've discussed this this morning. There are a lot of elements that we should focus on, but in order to create a win-win situation, it is better to have what I call a closed loop. I think you've mentioned to me in the afternoon, beginning of the afternoon, you mentioned to me the program that you're running in Morocco with the universities and state and private sector involved. So, yeah, so I think these kinds of collaboration could benefit our region. When taking the example of Mauritania, where I can see as a main constraint and challenges, and once again we've talked about this on and on this morning, is the infrastructure constraint, especially in the region where the green hydrogen projects are set up to be. And but also there are many opportunities in terms of derivative of green hydrogen. And we mentioned green steel, but not also agriculture. And we've discussed maybe the potential of the impact on fishing production and aquaculture in terms of oxygen. So there are a lot of possibilities where international stakeholders could step in order to help countries like ours benefit from this international collaboration.
Well, thank you very much. GIZ is very important in Morocco, and we are working all closely together. They have a lot of programs and a lot of subsidies and supporting. So and also the off-grid projects to bring electricity to the rural areas. It's very important, because the transition is not only for big companies at the port, but also inland. So I want to know more about your program. I miss countries like Kenya or something. Can someone in the audience can tell me something about other African countries? Someone? No one? No one? Is there any questions for us for this panel? Because we missed too many Africans. No. Well, then I will keep it short.
I have a question.
Please do.
I'd like to understand more Toyota's activities in space.
I got it. I understood. So.
Oh.
Yeah, is
It's good for me to exercise a little.
CSR and.
So basically we have two activities. We started in Zimbabwe with Mobility for Africa, giving the possibility to micro farmers to have vehicles, because if they have their produce, they can bring it to the market, generate more income. There, in a way, we made the same mistake like we did here in Europe. We give every farmer a vehicle. And what happens with most of the vehicles, they stand most of the time, because when they're in the farmland, the vehicle's not used. So learning from that already, in the next project in Kisii region and in Kenya, we're supporting a bigger model. So there, not every farmer gets a vehicle. We have drivers. And this is a community that works together, because many of the farmers produce 1-2 liters of milk, because they don't have too many cows, and you kind of get too much out of it. And we collect this milk, giving them a stable income, because the driver is driving from farm to farm and securing income. The first time, a stable income. Looking at bananas, looking at things you can export and generate income. And this is one of the things with a local grid producing energy to a fraction of the price like we would produce it here in Europe. And it's starting to develop. So this is the one project we do in the rural side in Africa, and then aggregate it and looking there at micro-mobility, electrified solutions. They're mostly Chinese tripods because they're very cheap, they're durable, and they're perfect. Now, the second thing, as I was involved very much in Germany for the last 15 years in the Clean Energy Partnership, I work with my German OEM colleagues to get the roughly 100 hydrogen stations moving in Germany. A contact was established via the High Cologne people to the Archbishop of Mombasa, who came to Cologne and I said, I want hydrogen. I read about it, I have to secure income for what I do. I run universities, school, hospitals. What can I do? Because donations are going down, I have to secure income. And hydrogen seems to be a way forward. So we have developed here in Germany, together with the region, a tool that's called a Hydrogen Scout. Looking at modeling, and they were very close to our colleagues from TNO, how you can transition a region based on renewable energy you have on site, and then looking at the market, how you can make a business case out of it. This tool we took to Kenya, we went to Mombasa and Malindi, and had a look. And no surprise, the energy costs are extremely positive. The church has already invested for many years in solar panels, so they can produce the kilowatt hour, which was a big surprise, today for 5 cents. Amortized investment in 15 months. And one lesson I learned as well is, as they're feeding a lot of children at the school, per children you need 2 trees to feed them, to cook the meals for them. And the bishop explained, you know, if we don't want to deforest entire Africa, we have to change this. We have to protect the environment. What can we do?
Electric cooking, the link between electricity access and deforestation is a bit...
Yeah, it's a little bit what, but I learned this morning that there's this Belgian startup which is investing already hydrogen for cooking. So I want to learn more about this one. But that was the idea. And therefore they're having already, the school buses will be switched to electric solutions. So they're looking at various things. What we did as well, said, sorry church, but there's not a business case. What the church now did, they went to Malindi, as you have a whole bunch of international hotels which struggle bigly on the situation electricity supply, because the grid is not stable enough, to see if maybe we find solution with stationary fuel cells to help out in storing the energy. And when the grid goes down, as you travel often in Africa, you know, I was sleeping mostly under a diesel generator, and you know how often that thing goes on at nighttime. So there might be a case, and we're looking at the harbor of Mombasa. And this is where we want to find partnerships, because as Morocco, it's important not only to think about producing hydrogen, we have to find the market. And this is where it comes to play. Because we have to give training to the people. If we have all these ambitious targets from the European Union to go to Africa and produce our hydrogen, Are we sending our people down there? Would it not make more sense for a European development program to say we have trained people already that are there? And this is also a discussion from this morning. We are great in painting PowerPoints in Europe. The Africans just do. And I saw that. And this mentality we want to support, and therefore we continue in our work bringing this forward.
So my question was whether it's commercial or it's foundation, CSR kind of business.
We are funding it. Normally you fund for 5 years, and then a project should run by itself.
Yeah, just
So just a suggestion, I don't know if you started before I came here, but maybe we can jump on the subject like this one, the social economical impact of a project like this, and maybe our fellow panelists here could maybe give more insight about it, rather than just ending it on a short note.
Well, I don't think he wanted to end it because we only introduced ourselves.
So you asked me about socioeconomic. So it's in the DNA of GIZ to work with our partner countries for local development and local value creation. And so Morocco was already mentioned a couple of times. OCP is investing a lot, and the government clearly says we favor projects that leave more value here in the country and not only filling the pipeline that doesn't exist to Europe. This is what we want to push everywhere. So we are called the PDX hub and not the hydrogen hub because we want to go into the value chains. The money, unfortunately, from the European Union and from my government, pipeline and fill it, right? So it's very much an import, I want your good stuff thing. So my question to the room is, how can we create a win-win? And how could an institution like GIZ, which is really in a lot of countries, help? We have very good connections to the Commission, and I'm working towards more European solutions, like we had with Algeria. What was her name? From SNAM mentioned, okay, this is a thing that goes from Germany, Austria, Italy, plus the European Commission together. They do the South Corridor. We can build something similar for Morocco, maybe, is there interest? So it's more a question to you, kind of private sector, investors, government, I don't know. What would you need to make it happen? So to have value creation in the countries, but to also serve the other side and a facilitator, neutral arbiter like GIZ. How could we help? The room was most alive when we discussed, so I thought let's rather discuss than me talking to you.
Maybe if someone from the audience wants to jump on this.
You take over your job.
yeah, it's okay. I love it.
I'm actually going to ask you a question, but I think it's related to what you're saying here. My name is Jason Pierce. I work for Chariot Energy. We're developing a hydrogen project in Mauritania in partnership with Total Energies. But we're also active in a number of other jurisdictions, including in Morocco, where we're currently developing 2 gas projects. I've got 2 questions for the panelists. One of them, Nourdine, you mentioned and you showed us the presentation of the Gelmim with Noon initiative, where you mentioned the fact that training capacities were due to be developed, and that those training capacities would most likely host a certain number of students from various African countries with which Morocco is tying ever closer links and has been doing so over the last 10 or 15 years. Morocco also needs to keep a competitive edge, and it has it's lucky to have quite a significant number of institutions of higher learning and qualified students who are able to feed into this industry and contribute to its development. That's clearly not the case of Mauritania just nearby. To what extent do you think, are there already some partnerships which are being discussed in that respect? Mauritania clearly needs to develop a pipeline of students in the engineering sector, in chemical industries. There are a whole wide range of specialities that need to be developed starting now. We're not talking 5, 10 years from now, we're starting now. That's just one question, if I may. And just a second one to GIZ, and we have extensive contacts with GIZ in Mauritania as well. And as you mentioned, there is a new project which is being developed to support the development of the sector. But I think Germany, as you mentioned, has an interest in securing its own supply. And in that context, is establishing quite strong bilateral links with different countries in order to promote the emergence of this hydrogen production in various host countries in Africa. But beyond that, all of these countries have challenges in terms of developing capacity. Is there some space maybe for GIZ to coordinate a, not continent-wide, but hydrogen producer-wide initiative to actually develop skills in chemical industry, in is putting iron ore on a ship. So the challenges, I mean, those challenges are real, and especially for places like Mauritania, where you're starting from a very low base. I mean, it's great to have the vision, but the pathways remain somewhat enigmatic. And I think the only examples we have of wholesale transformations of economies actually come from the Gulf countries over the past 30 or 40 years, and not so much from Europe, where we're sitting on hundreds of years of development.
Yeah.
Sorry, wide-ranging question, but...
Well, in Mauritania, what you know better than I know, the group who's super knowledgeable about hydrogen and is able to produce a vision and a strategy, this grand strategy, is rather thin, no? And below that, you don't have a lot of expertise. I saw the very same thing in Namibia, no? Where you have James Newper, who runs the world and gives these marvelous speeches, and he's so kind of, oh, you invest all your money immediately after you listen to James. You know him? I don't know. You do. Okay. So, so we did a skills assessment in Namibia to check, okay, what do you already have in terms of higher education and in the TVET sector for programs and education to build all the expertise that you need. And we looked at the kind of the education programs for the top managers down to the driver and everything in between that you need. And did that together with the Ministry of Education, and they now want to roll it out. And this is such an important work, and unfortunately, a kind of work that doesn't receive a lot of funding. So I would love doing that and continue supporting it in many, many countries. But if I run to my government, they say, well, no, only thing I'm interested in is the big ammonia project in Namibia and the ship that brings it to Port of Hamburg. I go, all right, but there has to be a foundation for it. Little interest. So I don't know.
That's why a regional approach may actually work, because basically what you're trying to do is to promote the emergence of an ecosystem.
Yeah.
And so you need to have that sort of fairly wide-ranging influence. And yeah, I mean, maybe only 40% of those people will end up working in the hydrogen sector, doesn't that?
No, well, that's absolutely. Yeah. They can do all sorts of things. Yeah, I'm with you. It's super important. Yeah, we can just shout.
Shout. Well, I was privileged to get five universities from Holland and from Germany to start an education and capacity building in Morocco. And I also have developers and investors who are going to realize the infrastructure. And they were very surprised about how many girls, women we have in the university as engineers. So next time I will be another mix, because I only had 2 women in the delegation, and we meet all the decision makers in Morocco and there were most of was women. So so that's also a question that the university asked to the Moroccan university. From we can learn from you how can you attract more women in as engineer. So I'm very happy that I'm involved in this project, and we're gonna realize it, and we share it with the African students. Inshallah, I will say that. So, you are monitoring.
No, I think the question mentioned how can Mauritania benefit from, lesson learned from cases like in Morocco. How do you think that we should step in order to fill the gap?
The question is already in my mailbox. they contacted me and they asked me, can we get the blueprint? I said, let's join and let's do it together. So Mauritania is already have shown their interest in the approach by creating capacity, creating the own. You have to own your the process. You have to own your energy transition before you can export it. So and that's the thing that many countries in Africa and many countries outside, ook in Europe, support. So I get every day I get 10, 15 on my LinkedIn profile ask me can we join. So and I said to everyone, energy transition has no border, has no nationality. So it's for everyone. So we share everything. Thank you very much.
Great. No, I think as you mentioned, is the initiative should come from the Mauritanian side, maybe in order to ask even from the private sector, asking what are the lessons learned that happened in Morocco, and as you also mentioned, I think Mauritania and Morocco are quite linked with
Same language.
even in the regional perspective with the. I think it's called the Great Sahel Initiative, the pipeline coming, the Great Maghreb Initiative, which is the. No, I'm referring to the pipeline coming from Nigeria to.
Yes.
Yeah. So I think there are many energy initiatives. Maybe we can piggyback maybe on these and try to why not learn from your expertise in terms of project of green hydrogen.
Everybody is welcome. I'm just a visitor in this world.
Since we have this flexible moderator style
Yes,
here,
yes,
I have a question to you.
Absolutely.
I love it.
So we all know about this big vision in Mauritania that doesn't match fully with real projects that do pre-feasibility or feasibility or even more. How do you avoid frustration in the population if nothing really happens apart from the shiny big vision and the big opportunities that never materialize, or maybe they come back later?
That's a great question actually, because we've mentioned skepticism in terms of for the population in terms of these renewable projects. But what you need to know is the green hydrogen is a component of the energy transition plan of Mauritania, because as you know, we are also focused on gas production, which can be labeled as transition energy. And maybe due to the fact that the gas project faced quite some challenges due to COVID and everything, but I think when we start to work on the start exporting gas and start more and more, I mean, focusing on the gas project, the project like a green hydrogen could find a better, as I can say, breathing space in order to give time, I mean, for the infrastructure to be put in place. As I mentioned, it's quite a challenge. The resources are there in terms of solar and wind exposure, in terms of water, but the main challenge is the infrastructure. So, and I think also this is where organization like yours could step in order to help the countries maybe better in terms of financing maybe, or maybe in terms of sharing expertise of what happened in other countries. And because also states are always reluctant to fund these type of infrastructure projects with their own money. They always need PPPs and other stakeholders to step in. Is there any question in the audience?
Any other questions, so we can jump to the PTX and then for the last.
It's okay.
Well, thank you very much for this open session. and we are tired.
Afternoon,
It's very nice topic. Thank you all. Thank you very much.
At least we had a good laugh.
Yes,
Not that, what you think?
PTX, we can move. Let's talk about the PTX.
Yeah.
What's the topic?
But as you mentioned, they are the priorities of the government.
Oh, you have a presentation?
No, I'm not doing my presentation. In the interest of time, I'm
They can do it, sir.
very nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
No, it's fine. We can do it.
Oh, from the lawyer.
Yes. I'm also an engineer.
Should I see? I have some bad experience in Portugal.
With really?
With Madoka power.
I know.
Really? Yeah, they are crooks. That's why. Seriously? With Miranda, that was with Miranda.
All right. I think this is the last panel session of the day then. I am going to actually let my panelists introduce themselves. I'm just going to say as much that we've got another great panel with some hopefully really exciting insights. Obviously we have the challenge of kind of wrapping things up a little bit, but I'm sure we can manage with these excellent. Maybe spend just half a minute. We obviously don't have a lot of time to just briefly introduce who you are, where you're from, and what your organization does. Is it working as we can pass this one?
Thank you very much. My name is Filipe de Vasconcelos. I'm Portuguese. I'm a professor of the University of Lisbon School of Law. I teach energy economics and energy tax law. I also work as a lawyer in VDA, Portuguese law firm. I work mainly in renewable energy projects, and especially from the perspective of both tax and regulatory issues. And I'm also a board member of the Portuguese Association for the Hydrogen Promotion, so I will keep in touch with some energy projects in Portugal, including for green hydrogen.
Good afternoon. My name is Andrik Avtanjuk. I'm a business developer from Tractable Engineering. So we're an engineering design firm with global footprint, about 5,000 people around the world. And we're involved in many energy and gas projects. That includes hydrogen, so we're in this business already for quite a while. And we have, I would say, quite a large portfolio of different projects, of course, a different development phase, but also including those which have been built and commissioned of smaller scale, but with a little bit larger scale in construction today, where we are involved, and of course a lot of projects where we participate as engineers in a development phase.
Good afternoon, my name is Willem Frens. I have my own project development company developing power-to-X projects, preferably not hydrogen, but hydrogen derivatives. In Africa, as well as I support from some investors with these kinds of projects. In Africa, also in Europe. In Europe it's mainly based on SAF, and I have a background in ammonia and fertilizers, so that's a short background. Oh yeah, at TNO in the past I dealt a lot with power-to-X, basically. That was one of my key topics over there.
Thank you, everyone. And I realized that in all my excitement about my panel, I actually forgot to introduce myself. So I'm Stefan, I'm the editor for Hydrogen and Future Fuels at Argus Media. We are traditionally a price reporting agency, but we are a lot more now, so we basically report on all the commodities that you can possibly think of, anything that's traded really, ranging from obviously crude oil to refined products, to gas, to power, to CO2, to agriculture, to metals. Anything, and we provide news and analysis on that data sets, and crucially also price assessments in markets that are traded already, which obviously hydrogen derivatives are not, so we do produce model production costs for that. And that is basically just I think, a good round of kind of introduction so we know who we've got here. And I'm going to start with a question, and that's maybe slightly provocative, but Willem, I know you're always happy to kind of share your thoughts, and I'm going to ask you to do the same. I'm going to ask you, so if there's one country and one derivative that country could produce in Africa, one African country obviously, what's the most exciting one from your perspective, the combination of, you know, the production of one particular derivative in one particular country? All of you.
Most exciting is Egypt with ammonia. The ammonia plants are already there. They have good renewable energy. Easy. What you have to look, but the question is a little bit. What I would like to say, is that you have to look for each individual country what you do to make it a little bit provocative. Nigeria is a very interesting one, actually, because you have natural gas oil, which could be a very nice molecule to actually integrate with green hydrogen to create a lot of value. And not many people over here probably want to go to Nigeria. But it is quite an interesting country.
Do you feel that there's any traction there already? I'm just going to ask it like this now, as if we always keep...
I don't see a lot of traction on it.
That's not
but I think it could be a very interesting one. South Africa, the same. They have the knowledge, the technology, they have the biomass, they have everything over there, including what I saw on the guy from Cummins, the cheapest renewable energy. So go for it. And that is what I like in Africa. They go for it. And that's
and I suppose there you have quite a lot of experience already, kind of in the, especially kind of from the oil and gas sectors, which could.
South Africa is basically one of the few countries that host a company which developed the Fisher Tropsch technology. So there's more knowledge in South Africa than anybody anywhere else in Africa or even in the world.
Right, thank you. Andre, what do you think?
Yeah, well, I would probably first, kind of echo what Willem said. Egypt, or we can say Morocco, and ammonia, or finally the final product as of the OCP. But that would be easy. It's not exciting. So you asked about exciting, and then I will try to pick something else. I mean, there were some discussions, for example, doing cheap hydrogen in Congo from hydro. They have amazing hydro resources, but they still need to be developed. But then potentially that's a like gigantic. It's gigawatts of hydro, which means 100%, almost near 100% utilization factor. So that's exciting. Or indeed, any, let's say, e-fuels, e-kerosene that can possibly be produced in South Africa, for example, due to Sasol presence.
Do you have one, sir?
Because that's one of the projects that we would have liked to be involved in. It was in, I believe, Uganda, which has a hydropower with a lot of additional hydropower that can be produced, where they could make ammonia and fertilizer. They didn't want to make ammonia; they wanted to make fertilizer over there. And I believe that in the end, it's Namikabon that is going to do the project. But I'm not 100% sure.
So you reckon in those countries it would be primarily about kind of domestic, even for Congo potentially, would it be, and for Uganda it would be primarily kind of domestic usage for fertilizers, or?
Anywhere in, listen, if you look at the International Fertilizer Association, in Africa they use only 1/5 of the fertilizer they actually should use to optimize their production. So if you produce fertilizer, you can consume it locally.
Limitless.
But the challenge is, and that is something the world has to work on, is that green fertilizer, it is mainly ammonia nitrates at this moment, because urea is not green, and the fertilizer that is used by small farmers is mainly urea. So they have to change the practices, and then you get the training exercise which we had before, again, because the farmers need to adapt their activities. As well, the price should be low enough, because those because farmers are not the richest people in the world, small farmers. And they cannot afford to pay a higher price for the fertilizer. That's the reason why they don't use enough, actually. So if we put the price up, they will not use more. And that's the kind of things that we have to work on. But if your electricity is basically for free, you can actually produce ammonium nitrates quite cheaply. Out of thin air, actually.
Great, Philippe, do you have anything to add, anything that?
Well, I will divide my answer into different parts. Well, in terms of your question, my answer is, well, Egypt for course, and Morocco for course, obviously in terms of ammonia and so on. So I agree with the answers of the other panel colleagues, but let me try to correspond to your provocation. For example, we have some countries like the Portuguese-speaking language countries like Angola or even Mozambique. For example, if we try to understand what kind of consequences could we or should we deal with, for example, in terms of deep water ports, Angola is a very good case because we know that Angola is now reaching their own plans in terms of green hydrogen value chain, which means that despite the fact that right now we couldn't see a very huge movement in terms of hydrogen value chain outputs like we are dealing with in terms of Egypt or even Morocco for ammonia, probably on the next coming years we will have some news, very interesting news in terms of how could we look also to these kind of countries for other sectors that probably are not the ones that we are primarily going into, for example, deeper ports, but also other things like the grids, the structure of the grids, the connections with other countries, and the main interesting thing from my perspective in terms of the connection between Africa and Europe is how could we or how should we connect primarily African countries in terms of the grid stations for being able to export not just hydrogen but outputs to Europe. So that's my main challenge, not just from a regulatory perspective, but also from the grid perspective and infrastructure.
So would you say this is where also when we're talking about partnerships and support and even financing, do you think this is where maybe the main focus should be even more so maybe than because it's all about also paving the way for the production. I reckon if you build the infrastructure to support it, the production projects will come. So would you say that's kind of where more of the focus should be?
Well, in my perspective, yes, because one of the biggest challenges of hydrogen value chain is that we are dealing with a worldwide value chain. It's the more decentralized energy vector that we are dealing with in the recent decades. So, for sure, we will need to readapt our own business models, even in Europe, even in the US, but especially in Europe, to being able not just to receive that hydrogen that will be exported, but also to being able to invest with security and certainty. Because we will not need just plans, we will not need just strategies, we will need an overall new picture on how to invest in Africa and how could we combine Africa trade-off for me is very clear. How could we or how should we combine on the one hand local consumption needs, local consumption challenges, and the perspective of the importers, meaning by that Europe. Because Africa will have a very biggest challenge in decarbonization and energy transition for their own self-consumption purposes. That's the reason why we are dealing with carbon credits. That's the reason why we are dealing with energy funds to support carbon credits for decarbonization of the national African markets. But at the same time, Africa is being challenged to export hydrogen, to implement projects to export energy. So I think that the main trade-off is that one.
Any other thoughts on this, or any views on kind of the infrastructure question in particular that maybe is not being discussed quite as much, whether it's export infrastructure or also, domestic infrastructure?
I think today, first of all, there were already a lot of signals and messages said in the previous panels and presentations. And I think also there were already lots of people who were saying quite practical things. Yeah, like, right, sometimes you actually need to start your project, your preparation of your country by building roads. Because if you don't have roads, you will have no projects. So I think that was already said today. And yeah, I think we will support. I also, I fully support what Felipe just said. And again, it's theme of probably in a way of our panel, like power to X. So the whole X, what's going to be the X for African projects? What exactly is going to be the X? Okay, X can be anything, and indeed that's the big question. And it's also the question of the added value for the Africans. And there indeed, again, there were today many thoughts, very valid thoughts. And if you really put them in a picture, it's not a picture with an answer yet today. Because on one side, sure, Europe wants, somebody just said, Europe wants ammonia in its ports, energy in its ports, nothing else. And then you have developer companies, international companies, they just want to make profit of that request. I'm going to take my diplomatic hat, I'm going to put it there for just a second. They don't care about the development of Africa. I know it's not true, but I mean, in a way, it's a complication, it's a challenge. Yeah, of course we say, yeah, it's going to create the jobs in Africa, but let's be frank, those guys, the main focus of these companies, and this is how the world works, they want to make profit from what Europe wants. So, and at the same time we say, yeah, just transition. But just transition, sure, yeah, of course, let's decarbonize African markets and African industry. But is Africa ready to pay green premium? And again, let's be frank, it's still a premium product. It's still a very expensive product, like green ammonia. Oh my God, guys, it's expensive. It's expensive for European farmers. How African farmers are going to pay for it? So this whole balance between how much we can put back, inject back of that value created into Africa, and how much we can import or export from Africa and import, let's say, to Europe. So finding the question to this balance is a complicated issue. Second, I don't believe it's the one single answer for Africa. Probably it will also depend from a country to country in Africa. All right.
If I may, just to give a clear example of a very interesting thing that, as a lawyer and also as a manager, I could see on the page. For the ones which are really acquainted to the oil and gas industry, we all know what we are dealing with in terms of the local content issues. Right now, we don't have a very concrete, a very clear and objective model for local content between Europe and Africa for hydrogen projects. When we will have a very clear model between our European countries and African countries in terms of what do you mean in terms of local content for hydrogen projects? My perspective is, for sure, we are not dealing with the same things that we are concerned when we are dealing with oil and gas projects. So I had the opportunity to discuss this with some governments, and I really try to insist on the importance of having a local content structure really shared between Europe and Africa. I couldn't see it right now yet, but I think that, for example, the European Commission will play a very crucial role if it could have the initiative to discuss, to implement, and to and also to listen the sector, to listen the shareholders. What could be local content for hydrogen projects in Africa? Because when we close the door in terms of local content, we open other very important doors, not just in terms of how could we benefit on a real sense Africa as a potential exporter of hydrogen and byproducts, but also at the same time how could we give value to the business models of European countries. So local content for me, and the redefinition of the old local content from the oil and gas sector to the new green hydrogen projects and value chain and business models will be, for sure, in my perspective, a very important one.
Then let's maybe one thing that I thought of when you also spoke about the different derivatives and the potential use. So what perspectives do you see, or what potential do you see for specifically, and we spoke about obviously ammonia for domestic use in Egypt, but there's of course also the element of all the potential potential for, you know, bunkering hubs emerging in Africa potentially, and then maybe, you know, a kind of we need more stops when we're running on methanol or on ammonia than we do right now running on diesel with the ships. So are there particular countries where you say this is going to be in, I mean, maybe Egypt's Suez Canal economic zone, obviously a lot happening there. But are there other countries where you say maybe that is a big opportunity, you know, becoming a bunkering hub, and generally kind of the shipping industry as a potential off-taker that would be kind of in a way in Africa, but on kind of a global, from a global perspective?
Well, first of all, I think you need to be at the sea, so you should not be landlocked for bunkering. So that excludes a few countries. And I think that basically anybody can do it, because you need CO2. And even in a country like Namibia, with a lot of desert, there is CO2. But what we discussed before, the difficulty is actually the regulations in the European Union. Because if you make, for instance, methanol in Africa, whatever country, even if you use green CO2, I've understood, then it is not counted green. Because there is no ETS system on the biogenic CO2 in Africa. And that's the regulations in the European Union. But I understood from, I don't see her anymore, that is might be changing in the European Union. So if that is the case, then it will be difficult to do that, because it's not only that it doesn't, you cannot, it's not only that you cannot export it to Europe, because you can use it also to have a boat going from Africa to Asia. But the problem is that Maersk is not allowed to use it, because they are in their balance sheet or whatever, their annual reporting, they report in the European Union, and then they cannot say it is green conforming the regulations in the European Union. So I think to make it happen, this is important. However, forget methanol being a fuel. It's much better to make chemicals out of it. You can make plastics out of methanol. Their technology is over there, and that adds even more value. The other thing is, and that is the story basically from liquid wind, forget regulations at all, because there's much more premium in the marketing. So if you use biogenic CO2, and you can use that in your marketing story, you can sell it to a cruise ship for 10 times the price of normal methanol, as long as you have the marketing story, not the regulations, the marketing story for people paying more for the cruise ship thing. So that's where you have to basically look a little bit in the new models, and that's also for Africa.
Which I mean, I reckon in a way that's quite an optimistic view and quite a positive view. If the marketing story is potentially enough to kind of get you there, you maybe don't even need
countries like Africa, and that sounds strange, but I think it was the World Bank or the World Economic Forum or whoever who did a study on who wants to pay most for greener products, and that is not the European Union, and it is not the United States. It's countries in Africa and Latin America. It's not the most, but it's percentage-wise of their income. So there is a trigger in Africa to become cleaner, but obviously they should be able to pay for it. But if you leave it to the United States and the European Union, we want basically to keep what we want. And if the people in Africa get poorer out of that, we don't care in the European Union. Sounds a little bit stupid, but I think that's more or less the reality.
Yes.
Maybe since we're a little constrained for time, as far as I'm aware, let's just open it up and see if there are any questions from the audience on to the panelists on any of these topics, any follow-ups or anything unrelated as well. There's one over there.
Maybe a follow-up, William, your comment. I think some of the discussion we have today is quite frank in policy and how policy is driven by the actual business intent. You know, the last comment you made knowing that, what are the things we think we could do to move the actual progress forward? What I see today is actually, those things are progress. Mainly because all those roadblocks are a roadblock for investment. Therefore, as much as we talk very nicely about all those, and if end result is because those benefit or whatever those things are, it's impeding the actual investment, it's going to be very slowly coming. So what can we do?
Yeah, perhaps. Yeah, I would supporting that, and so reflecting on what has been previously said. Probably the reality will be that indeed, majority of, for example, of the projects, at least in the first wave of the project, there will be ammonia for export, because it is simple, it is more bankable, it has more clear, financial story. The capex is more limited comparing to building hydrogen, converting it, let's say, to a methanol, and then converting it also in plastics on site, or making even e-kerosene, whatever. So those cases are much more complicated, and on a very pioneering story, and capex is important, and bankability is important. So probably the reality will be that the first projects will be ammonia for export, and it kind of sucks, sorry, for African countries, but probably they will have to live with it at least for a while. And then, of course, with a serious plan, then to localize further and further, making and pushing the X further and further down the value chain. But the reality, again, sorry for being frank, it will be for a while. It will be, maybe not very nice and not very just transition thing, but it will be ammonia for export.
I agree with you, and I don't agree with you, because it is logical that it will be ammonia for export. But while we were just talking about Mandoka, when I prepared basically the investment paper for them, one of the things that I what is going to happen if we need to reduce all the CO2 because we have climate heating? We have to get rid of the urea, and half of the population in the world is dying. Will that still be the case, that the H has more value than the N at that moment? Because these kinds of things are going to happen during the next decade. And I can imagine that the N becomes more valuable at that moment, and that people don't want to export or use the green ammonia as an energy source, and they want to return it back actually to a food source. I don't know, I don't have the crystal ball, but it is something that we have to take into account. Because that energy that we create out of that exported ammonia, basically, the cost of that the people will die on the other side of the world.
No, I agree with you, and probably that's why it's such a loose situation also for African countries who would host the projects for creating ammonia. Yeah, for maybe first 5 years or 10 years, it will be export for energy purpose. But as you say, then you rethink the value of the product because you also find new applications, new business models, and those guys, the capacity is not going anywhere. It's there. It's still a win. Perhaps it's not the AAA win as maybe everyone, me including, would wish in the room, but that's still a win.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you, and that's another reason why I think that we are possible reactions of the population, the governments, and the economies. One of the things, or one of the reasons why I think that dealing with local content for oil and gas standard projects will not be included in local content issues for green hydrogen projects. It's a tough thing, but probably we could never think on this for oil and gas standard projects, because we are dealing with a standard alone, if you allow me to say. But probably when we are dealing with green hydrogen projects, utilization of byproducts that could be very quite relevant for other value chain or value chains, for sure the issue will arise.
And basically, just to make it a little bit more provocative.
As we were not enough.
No, because next week or the week after there will be an interview with me in World Hydrogen Technology. I'm going to give you a little opening already. What is mentioned. Do you know how the fossil fuel, the oil and gas sector, how that basically develops in a country? For instance, Mozambique recently found some gas.
Yeah.
But also in the Netherlands. So you have the first three things is always local.
Yep.
The first thing what you normally do, you give it to a household to heat his house and to cook. At the same time, you give it to small companies, bakeries, etc., to bake bread, and also to give it to some industries locally that can use it. At the same time, if possible, and you still have some natural gas left, you're going to use it in an existing refinery, which is already there, or you're going to develop some power plants and to give the people some electricity at home. And even if you have more, then I start developing methanol and urea plants. Why urea? Because it's easy to transport. Ammonia is not easy to transport. Everybody says that, but they don't know what ammonia is. After that, you start actually looking at, first of all, you make a pipeline to your neighboring countries where you do the same things again, and after that you go to LNG. That's the last resort for your stuff. What we now do with the green hydrogen in Africa, we start basically at hydrogen being the LNG equivalent of the renewable energy, without basically developing the local market. And that should always be done first. Next week or the week after, it's for free. You can look at it. It's a long interview.
Great, looking forward to that. Maybe we can squeeze one last very short question with a very short answer, if anyone's got any. I suppose in the interest of time, we have to wrap it up. That is a question, great.
Just one question quickly, following up on your comment. Sorry, I didn't get your name from Trefterbel. If ammonia is the first mover option that's retained in Africa, it does raise some questions as to what the benefits are for the host countries in terms of fiscal revenue. Because we know that, I mean, the on land, very accessible, quite exposed, and it will have to be factored in a different manner to the way in which the oil and gas players factor.
Well, sorry, I'm not really the best person to. Finally, we're an engineering company who works in the projects, but I mean, again, when I said probably, it's because that's where everybody's running today. That's what I'm saying, because this is the direction where everybody's running today. You go to Morocco, you go to Namibia, it's ammonia because it's simple. That's probably the only answer. It's because it's simple. It's something that we can do with more limited capex and much reduced rate. I agree with you. Then comes the whole structuring your business case and the offtake. I can imagine that those people that are planning to build any large-scale ammonia plants, they also plan to engage some off-takers for at least 10 years. So they kind of solve the early mover problem. That's my guess.
And I think we should not be too optimistic about it. To be honest, I was advising a German power company last year, together with Hans Vrijhoef from Ammonia Energy and some other people. And basically we were not hired by the top management, but the layer below. Because they were fed up by the top management that the German government was buying everywhere ammonia, and they had no clue what to do with the ammonia. Basically, they said, we don't have coal-fired power plants where we can put it in. The crackers are not there yet, so what the hell are we going to do with all that ammonia that the German government is buying? We need those crackers first. Otherwise, the ammonia for the fertilizer is far too expensive to be imported. So that will not happen. The cracking needs to be there in order to put it in a refinery. If there are no crackers, and there are no crackers yet on the scale that we needed, then we really do have a challenge.
I'll give to you in 1 second, Philippe, but maybe also just to add on the cracking topic, and I think that's if the one thing that we're seeing, and that's one of the data sets that we have, and one of the numbers that we're tracking are kind of the announced ammonia cracking facilities. And as with everything else, there are massive delays, and it's quite obvious, you know, a lot has been announced over the past 2 or 3 years, but it's not really going anywhere. And I think a lot have been announced for, 2027, 28 startup. And that's just realistically not going to happen based on kind of what we're seeing at the moment. It's definitely going to be longer, at least on a large scale, and then that certainly plays into that, because I think we had Uniper saying a couple of weeks ago at the World Hydrogen Summit in Rotterdam as well, our customers are asking for hydrogen, they're not asking for ammonia, which is exactly your point, right? And to deliver that, you need the cracker. So that is also a problem. But Philippe,
just a very quick point on the issue of the tax revenue, because this is a very relevant topic. Being a tax lawyer and a tax advisor, it is very clear for me that in the next 10, 15 years, we will assist to a redefinition of the tax systems in Africa. Mainly because of the investments in green hydrogen value chain. Let me be even more concrete. The old models that are implemented, especially for oil and gas projects, based on PSCs and PMCs, and that's it. We all know that we are what we are talking about. Will be progressively substituted by new models. In my perspective, even much more tax-based. And probably, I think that we will assist to different kinds of parallel movements. The first one will be specifically resource taxes for those kinds of productions, meaning by that resource rent taxes. So we will assist in the next decade to new models or the redefinition of the old resource rent taxes for the new green hydrogen value chain in Africa. We have studies from the World Bank saying this. At the same time that we have the whole trade-off every day, which is, should we grant tax benefits to the investors, or should we implement new resource rent taxes? I think that we will face this trade-off in the next decades, for sure, but it is clear for me that the answer to your very important question around tax revenues will be a redefinition and the creation of new modalities of taxation, especially at the level of resource taxes in those countries. And we have some policy orientations and guidelines on this, which probably allows us to see far enough in terms of what we are or what we could expect on this.
wonderful. I suppose we could talk about this a lot longer if we had the time. Very interesting, very insightful. Thank you so much for the contributions. Thank you very much for the questions as well. Could we get a warm round of applause, please, for the panelists? Thank you.